Great. So we will kick off tonight with just a little bit of intro, and then we'll go to public comment. So if you are here, if you're an attendee and you would like to have public comment, if you can raise your hand. And just a reminder for the raise your hand button, if you go to participants, you should see a tab that opens that allows you to raise your hand at the bottom of that participants tab. Should be an opportunity to do that. And I do see one hand, but if anybody else would like to give public comment at the beginning, we can do that. And then we'll also have time at the end as well. Okay, so we will start tonight. It really is kind of part two from what we had already done. Gosh, was it a month ago already? My goodness, time is flying. Where we got together and we talked about we had a lovely handbook that was created by Angela Del Porto, one of our co-chairs, who is here with us tonight to listen in. She participated last Tuesday, I think it was.
Yes, last Tuesday.
And so she's here to listen in and try to help be some of the glue that binds us all together. And so we're really grateful for her support. She took a look at what we had remaining and helped to draft the memo that you guys received a little bit ago, and really trying to order our questions in an order that might help us tackle some of the things that we haven't touched on at all. And if we don't get to some at the end, then that may be okay. And they may be either less discussion or just things we've, at least ground we've tread a little bit before, whereas some of the other questions we hadn't even talked about as a group. So that's kind of the goal for tonight. And then what we'll do going forward is we are hoping to have another meeting with everybody, all of the working group back together in August, which Chitra just sent out a message, I think yesterday or Friday, I think it was yesterday, which some of you already replied to. Thank you for that. It's trying to find the best time for us to get together in August. And then we may be seeking an additional time. So answer that question with whatever days and as many days as times as works. We'll get that set. And co-chairs and myself are meeting on Thursday to talk about, some folks have requested an additional meeting to talk about housing and traffic. And so we're going to kind of put our heads together and see what we can come up with. If we are able to find an additional time, we'll let you know, either asking for some availability for a second meeting. Again, if you would like to participate in that, not required to participate in that. So that will be forthcoming. And then just kind of a reminder on kind of what is the path we are on. We are trying to work so that at our August meeting, we can kind of present to you, back to everyone, kind of, here's what we've heard about different preferences for different aspects of how the plan area might look, and maybe try to organize them into two draft alternatives. For example, some folks really wanted to have, this is kind of maybe a simpler one, but park, and what we'll talk about tonight, some folks in the last group want to have a park that is centralized, and some folks said we just want to have a large centralized park, the location is not as important. But then some folks said want to have a centralized park and the location should be near the creek. So those are kind of different ways to think about it. And so we'll try to get those into two kind of characteristics, I guess, of what two draft alternatives could look like, that try to cover the different polls and the different ground that we have for those topic areas. So that is the hope. That is what we will be endeavoring to do. And Angela, Chitra, Nikki, have I forgotten anything that we said to the other group or that we wanted to share?
I did want to mention that, oh yeah, you did say that we're hoping to have a discussion on affordable housing and traffic in August, if we can manage to organize that. And I did want to just say again that the questions we chose are the ones that we'll need in order to sort of give our best information about what we as a group would like to see in the proposals to the consultants. So this is our kind of our last chance to do that. So we're limited on time. I mean, we only have this meeting pretty much to do that. So I did encourage everybody in the last meeting to just be aware of the time and how many questions we have to cover. And also, I write these things as a person who is not trained in city planning at all. So some of what I write comes across as layman's terms, which is, I write the way I understand it. But I'm here to clarify any questions that people have about the way I've written it. So if you have questions or if it doesn't make sense to you, I'm happy to do that. That's all.
I will say, as a trained city planner, I think layman's terms are the best terms. So, but I think what it does mean is that with any terms, if folks mean different things by the same word, which, as many of you know, can happen in any conversation, it's good to say, well, when I hear this, I read it as this. And that might help us to know, oh, okay, that's what you mean when you say that answer versus what someone else may mean with saying the same answer. So who hasn't been in a conversation like that before, Okay, so with that, we will turn it over to our public comment. And again, if you are in public comment, and Keith, I see you there. I think maybe you're here to listen in. Can we allow Keith I can do that. I can unmute you. Keith, I have unmuted you if you want to unmute yourself. I think you are here just to listen in tonight. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have my park meeting in a few minutes. I'm just hanging out here before I go to the park meeting.
Yes, and thank you for going to the park meeting. Certainly will be an interesting one, I'm sure. Many attendees and much comment. So thank you for
very much so.
That. Okay.
Thanks.
Great. All right. If you are on the, go ahead.
I see Lakiba is also in one of the attendees. She should be attending the meeting today.
Can you promote her, please?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Lakiba. All right. So we see one public commenter again. If you are here for public comment, you can find it on your screen. If you're on the phone, which I don't think anyone is, you can press *9 to raise your hand. And I see Rebecca Saunders has raised her hand. And so Chitra will unmute you and you will have 3 minutes to address the working group. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Rachel and Chitra, I just want to say thank you so much for meeting the public where we want to be met. I love hearing the voices of the working group members, and it means a lot to me personally and also to people here in Ventura that the human beings that have been appointed to serve actually have an impact. So I think you're running a great meeting. Thank you so much. And so a couple of things. I'm excited about the prospects of additional meetings to talk about transportation and housing. I helped bring forth Alternative M, which I know for many people is kind of, dead on arrival. It kind of came out of nowhere. And at the last minute, Terry and Keith and I put this together. And, but I would like to just say that that is a total out of the box, nutty possibility. And I really would encourage the panel to discuss it if they can squeeze it in when they talk about affordable housing, because it gives us lots of housing and no really new commercial space, which we, to be honest, we don't need. So yeah, I am again, just grateful to the working group members for working extra and overtime, and Angela putting in so many hours on interpreting what people are and trying to build consensus. I know it's hard. And yeah, and if possible, I would love to see some working group members be part of the conversation with the consultants and the city staff when you take this back for review, so that we don't get into the hot water we got with the when we had those first 3 proposals that came through. So anyway, I guess that's it. And thank you again so much, everyone, for your service. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Great, thank you. And I don't see any other hands. So I'm gonna share my screen and we will get into, oh, and one thing I think I forgot to say, but maybe we already said, or / we remember from last time, is the format will be that we will do, read each question like we did before and have a minute to go around And Nicole will come onto screen when it's your minute is up if you get to your minute or are exceeding it, to try to help us keep time. So if you see her face flash into your window, that means you've reached your time limit. And then are folks seeing this? Are they seeing my screen?
Do we want to see your chat? We
No,
are.
now
Uh-huh.
it's messed up. Okay, hold on. Ah. Stop share. Start again. Share screen.
You can do it.
Okay, now are you seeing it again?
Can you make it a little bit bigger?
Yes. Is that better?
Yes, this is better.
Okay. Great. So that's just the same thing you had in your PDF packet, but just as a Google Doc. So, okay. So we're going to question 16. Yeah. So for discussion, and we'll try to keep doing a good job, as Angela said, of trying to move along if we can't get to consensus, or even to kind of some main ideas. But again, feel free to share with each other, create new proposals, propose different things. All right. So the first question we'll tackle is question 16. What configuration of parkland and public plaza do you support? And I think for some folks, generally it's parkland has been expressed as kind of green space, more natural, and then public plaza maybe as a paved space that could be suitable for other types of activities that might not be as well done on grassy areas. So it could be a large contiguous green space with bike and pedestrian paths, large contiguous green space plus a plaza with bike and pedestrian paths, small pocket park scattered throughout with car access, no large park, a pocket park at grade in the middle of the site, as in South Park in San Francisco. So shout out to Alex's favorite park, or at least one of his favorite parks. Linear parks such as bike paths and greenways, or other ideas or combination. And as a reminder, folks can support more than one answer. So you could like more than one type of green space in the entire area. And again, this is for the entire project area, not one particular parcel only. So why don't we start, Alex, you're at the top of my screen for me. So do you want to go ahead and go first?
Sure. Hold on a second. Oops. Okay, sorry, I'm having
No worries.
technical issues here. So I had added the like a South Park. I think it's mostly because I wanted to give some sort of focal point, like a place, an outdoor place in the middle of the site. I have some concerns that if we just do the Creekside Park, that'll be relatively hidden from the rest of the neighborhood. So I don't oppose the Creekside Park, but I think that that a centralized park would create like a what do you call it, like a crossroads and a meeting place.
Would you put that as letter A for you, or what letters might you associate that with?
Yeah.
Because and I will say the next question, just to preview, because I think you kind of answered a little bit of the next question, which is like where you want the large open space, assuming that you would want a large open space. So that's like the kind of location question. I heard you kind of maybe say, what I heard you was like letter A and letter C or letter D, but I'm not sure if that's what you were intending.
Right. So I guess it would be A and D.
Okay. Great. Kirsten, do you want to go next?
Hi,
Hello.
nice to see everyone's face. I would say that I would support B and E. B is I support because maybe it's partly because I'm doing elder care as one of my many tasks. And grass is not accessible to everyone's, depending on your ability to walk. Paved area having a combination of grass and play area. Grass is great for children to play on. Grass is great for games, Frisbee, things like that. For less mobile individuals, paved area is more accessible and allows them an outdoor experience. And then I'm sure it hasn't completely escaped your notice that I'm a strong advocate of pedestrian bicycle mobility. And so that's why I say E is my second choice. I think it's essential to have this neighborhood function without gridlock.
Yeah, that is the ideal. Great. Thank you so much, Kirsten. Lund, do you want to share next?
Sure. I would say I generally agree with what Kirsten just said. I like the focus on the bike paths and the pedestrian paths. So I think E would be my first choice. I know Kirsten said B was her first choice. I think E is my preference, and then I think either A or B after that.
Okay.
I guess I don't see the 100% necessity for a plaza, depending on what happens with other parts of the site. But I do think it's important to have green space with bike and pedestrian paths. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And it could be that maybe there are plazas and green space or some combination that is throughout. So kind of here, that's kind of what I see, like kind of depending on the overall spread, like what does the plaza look like?
Yeah, to me, really the plaza, it comes down to viability. I think it depends on the density of the site. I think if there's a lot of density, there's more need for green space and more need to kind of separate out the buildings. If it's a little bit more lower scale, I feel like having more linear parks and I don't think a plaza is necessary if you don't have a lot of density.
Got it. Okay, and then I think Terry, do you want to share next?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I would pick a combination of maybe A and B. It would depend on, the density, of course. And I think one of the issues that we're facing in Palo Alto is the fact that we already are running a deficit in our needed park space. And I think we need to think about how we can figure out ways we can add more park space and not less. And I would like to see, obviously, the creek maximized to its potential, and think about ways, there are other developments that are going up around the NV cap area that will certainly impact this area as well. So I would encourage more park space.
Okay, great. And so did I capture A and B? And then I'm just writing under B. I think this goes for both areas. Kind of thinking about a bigger picture of where development's happening and like the need for open space. Is that right, Terry?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have a clarifying question, Kirsten?
I do have a question. I would like, as we answer this question and future questions, to know more about the property across the street from the study area, the old Varian, I think it is, site.
Across ECR?
Yes, correct. So it's, let me look at my map. It's, I'm trying to look at a map that
We can bring up a map later, but we know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's opposite the Parmetti Hotel, sort of half a block down from the fish market on the same side as the west side of Fish Market. And I know there's a number of housing units, as I understand it, planned for that site, which will make this even more underparked.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this little region.
Yeah.
And I just wonder, do we have any idea of the number of citizens, Palo Alto citizens, that will be in that project, or is there?
We'll see if we can get that I don't know if we have it at the tips of our fingers right now, but we can certainly try to make sure we incorporate that and bring that certainly to the August meeting. or
Because I
anything
think
else
it
at that
affects
time.
our thinking both on traffic and on parks and other amenities.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Okay, Yunin, would you like to share?
My first choice would be A. I would like a large continuous green space. And regarding to the plaza, because I feel we don't have a large lot here, so I would prefer it just to be a park. So if we are not able to afford a big park, I would choose, I think E, that is a linear green space with the bike and the pedestrian lane. And the other thing is I was thinking, so if we look at the whole Ventura area, we don't have even a medium size or larger size park. So any big park, we need to cross the El Camino to the ballpark or drive to the other neighborhood parks.
Thank you. Lakiba?
Okay, so this is in general is one of my most flexible areas, I would say, kind of flexible on question 16, but I did choose A as my first choice. And then I have B and E kind of equally second.
Great. Do you want to say anything about your choices?
Nope. Well, I like the idea of a lot of space. Just being able to have a large park in this area feels good to me personally. That's it. That's why I chose those first.
Awesome. So I'll just kind of say, and then we'll have some time for discussion or questions if people have questions of each other. Yeah, I definitely see, a lot of these are, in my mind, they're not necessarily mutually exclusive. So you could have pocket parks and a large park. One of the things I gather from this, which I think you guys share with the other group that met, is that having a large park that can be a gathering space and have different type of recreational opportunities than you could have like in a smaller park is like really important. I would say almost everybody either wanted the large park or the large park with the plaza. And I think what I hear in some folks is if they had to choose just one of these items, they would choose letter A. Like that would be the most important. And then if we can get some of the other ones, great, but like not at the expense of losing letter A. That's kind of what I hear from people. I see some nodding. Anybody want to add to that or ask questions of each other or make a pitch for pocket parks or anything else that they see on the list? Kirsten?
You said a word that really resonated with me, which is gathering space. And one of my passions is building community and trying to allow people to connect with people that they don't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis, because I think it builds neighborhood and thus urban cohesiveness. And so I guess the ability to get face-to-face, the ability to see your neighbors is just such a huge part of what I want from park space.
Great. Great. That's really helpful.
To me, one question just to bring up, and I think this isn't a question later. So you can have green space that's insular or open to others, right? So you could have the green space be primarily for the housing units and for those in that community, or it can be inviting and welcoming to those around the community as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think one of our further questions kind of tackles that, like how do we think about and account for, additional open space and green space that might be provided. And some of it may be private. And certainly we want to make sure that folks who are living in homes have some, I think we all can agree it's nice to have some private green space as well as ones you share with, the public. Can certainly be amenity for those people who are living there. but that's a good point. Any other comments, questions, remarks that people want to make or anything?
Hey, Rachel?
Yeah.
I just wanted to, nobody picked pocket parks, but I wanted to throw out something to think about.
Yeah.
So like over the last 10 years, Mountain View has built maybe like 8 or 10 pocket parks, like approximately 3/4 of an acre each. And they try to put it in the center of every neighborhood. And they're really popular.
Mm.
And it's just, they're smaller than Palo Alto parks, but I think we should consider it. Sometimes they're developer built, and sometimes they're city built.
Mm.
The small area of Palo Alto that is south of the Creek Bridge into Mountain View has a couple of these tiny pocket parks. They're about the size of a city lot.
Like a house.
Yeah, I'm crazy about the ones that are like the size of one lot. I think it's better when they're like about the size of 3 lots, house lots, because then you can actually get like a playground and a lawn and some like native plant areas.
Mm-hmm.
When they're down to like really pretty small, like the Sarah Wallace Park near California Avenue, you sort of have to cut out different uses, and then it's kind of not very, it's not really worth much.
Yeah. For the parks that you said, Alex, you said some are private and public. Are they some built private, but they are public in terms of access, or is it some of them are private and they're like not accessible?
I think that they're all public parks, and I think they're actually all built by the city, but sometimes they're like the land is given to the city by the developer.
Okay. Yeah.
And the developer puts in money to build the park. But they're all public parks. And then maybe later I will mention that there are 2 sort of like private parks or private open spaces in new projects in Palo Alto. So there's one on Stanford land at the University Terrace. And I think there's another one on Arbor Real on El Camino. So we can talk about that more later.
Yeah. And are those are private and people cannot access them, or private and the public can access them?
I think it's just they're so part of like the lawns are open to the public, but then they also have like private pools, which are only for the residents.
Got it. Great. Well, something we can all check out. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next question, which is question number 17. So kind of building on that last sentiment of wanting to have a large contiguous green space that is connected to bike and pedestrian paths, where would it best be placed? You can vote for all that you're comfortable with. A, adjacent to Park Boulevard. B, in the old Fry's parking lot. C, in the center of the plan. D, Cloudera parking lot. E, railroad spur. F is a combination of A and B, so that it's adjacent to both park and the creek, and in the old Fry's parking lot, so kind of all those. And then G, Plaza on Park Boulevard that connects easily to park alongside Matador Creek at grade. Other ideas or combinations. So we'll go in reverse order. Lakeepa, would you like to go first?
Okay. So first, what is this? Where is the center of the plan area?
Good question. If you were to ask me, I would say the center would be the Fry's building where it is maybe right now, although I don't know if that's the technical center. So maybe the Fry's parking lot might also be the center. What do other folks think when they say center? I think, I guess I would say, Lakeepa, I think what this question means, and Angela, maybe you can chime in, is would it be kind of in the center and like away from like the main roads like El Camino, or kind of more to one side or the other of the plan area? Is that, Angela, what that's kind of meaning?
I actually did a little like a cross section. I mean, I made a cross in the center map at one point, and it's just on the sort of north side of the Fry's building, kind of at the edge of the railroad spur and the Fry's building. That's the center. And
Okay.
around Ash.
Okay. Okay. I realize I'm not that definitive on my answer, but let me start by
Okay,
saying,
hopefully we didn't throw you off too much.
well, it's the fact that I live near the Cloudera parking lot, and I and many neighbors walk that block. I did start to see and think that it might be nice to have a park there. So one of my choices is the Cloudera parking lot, potentially.
Okay.
Just depending on where we put everything else, potentially the old Fry's parking lot. Sorry to be so wishy-washy, potentially in the center of the plan area. It's hard for me because I'm more thinking, I guess in this exercise, we're thinking of the park first and then placing things around it.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little disconnected from the other questions. Sorry, I'm
yeah.
gonna be off again. My computer's very slow right now. My internet is very slow. Yeah, I think it's kind of trying to mesh everything together. So I would encourage folks, if you have a particularly strong vision, like you want the park here because you want the housing in this other place, I think that's fine. And it's also okay to say, you know, for example, with Lakiba, that you might say you want something that's in Cloudera and you want another park in another location too, right? We don't have to, we're not just gonna, I don't think we're gonna have only one park.
Okay.
My overall, I think this is just thinking, if you think of that large central park,
okay,
like where would you like to see that? And you can choose all the locations that you think would be good for it. So.
Okay. Well, one other thing that I thought of when you said that, personally, although I'm noticing all the housing that's across the street from Cloudera, but I think my top of mind is I'd rather have a park in Cloudera as opposed to housing.
Okay.
So that's why I'm choosing D.
Rachel?
B and C.
Yep.
Heather has joined us, so can we go back to the number 16 question for her?
I don't know if we're gonna be able to go backwards, but Heather, welcome. Is she promoted? Are you
Yes.
here? Oh,
I'm
okay,
here,
sorry,
yeah.
Heather. Hi.
No worries. I can come back later. Thank you.
No, yeah, and we'll see if we can get back to it, but I don't want to lose our momentum. The question was just whether or not you wanted what kind of parks you wanted. And what we had as consensus was most people want, for real and for certain, a large open space that maybe has a plaza. People want bike paths and greenways that are connecting throughout the site. And for pocket parks, folks were okay with that, but really they don't want that to be at the expense of having a large open space. Like that is a priority for everyone, to make sure that we have a large continuous open space. And now we're kind of talking about where might be the best location for that large contiguous open space.
Great, thank you. That makes
sense. You're welcome. All right, thank you, Lakiba. Yunin, where would you like to see the large open space?
I would echo with Lakiba the choice D. That is based on the assumption we are looking to other opportunity with this Cloudera parking lot because it's huge. So regarding to the housing, I would also prefer that it becomes a park. But if we just purely thinking where we want to put the only big park, I can also go with option F, because we already have some Matadero Creek there, and it looks like it's the central of the Ventura area, and it's close to the Park Boulevard, which we want to make it more like pedestrian and biking road. Yeah, so that is the something on my mind.
Great. All right, thank you. Terry.
Okay, I'd like to, I guess I like F the best.
Okay.
This is park along the Matadero Creek. I think that makes a lot of sense because it could connect with, is it Bulware Park? Is that the name of it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It could connect with Bulware Park, if you heard me.
Yep. You're coming through clear.
So I think that makes a lot of sense. And the creek offers a lot of opportunities. I think that makes the park ideal if we can use that area.
Yeah. Great. And then Kirsten?
Hi. Yes, I have kind of strong opinions on this one, I found out by reading the packet. I think that what makes a lot of sense is that the Cloudera parking lot site park is expanded to include some pedestrian bicycle mobility. So that becomes one of those strippy parks, you know, that people can walk on and it's green and stuff. Especially if we do somehow connect through to the backside of Fry's at Ash, that kind of makes a mesh of permeability to pedestrians and bicycles. And I like either F or G, which are quite similar, except one of them has the word at grade and one of them doesn't. But I'm fine whether the bulk of the park is on Park or the bulk of the park is by Matadero Creek, but kind of that concept of something stretching along Matadero Creek from Park and then having a connection to Bulware.
Great. So what I gathered, and did I write down in your letter D properly that you were saying the linear park that's already at Cloudera, kind of expanding that so it's like a linear connection pathway? Is I understanding that correctly, what you were saying?
Right. It might require a few extra feet because I don't want to take away the green space and also the bioswale function, which is replenishing the groundwater. I mean, it has a biological function as well as a green space function.
Yeah. So don't upset the current function, but expand it.
Yep.
And then you said, and I'm sorry, I just that quickly dissipated in my mind, F and G because it's great to connect to the creek. Is that right?
And I don't care if the bulk of the openness is closer to Park or closer to the front of Fry's. I'm open to what is best from a design standpoint as far as fitting in the housing that we want to fit in. But I do like the idea of it connecting along the creek through pedestrian bicycle modalities to, you know, again, to let the site breathe. Transportation wise, the parks are an important tool.
Great. Lund, do you have a preference for the park?
I think people have said some really interesting things, and I'm generally in agreement. I like the idea of making use of the existing Bulware Park and obviously expanding it. And then it also makes sense what people are saying near Olive, you know, whether it's a Cloudera site or the railroad spur, both I think provide opportunities to have a linear kind of smaller park in those areas. And then having just some connectivity. So you kind of have one park on one side, one park on the other, and then a bike path or something that connects them in between.
Great. And then Alex.
Okay, so I think I don't think I have a preference on this one. I think the way I'm thinking about it is that the park should be where there are a whole diversity of uses around it. So meaning the existing office and new residential, if there is any retail, that is somewhere in the middle of all of that, or of all of those uses.
It's great. I'm going to put that under the center with an asterisk, that it's really kind of like in the center of the action, right? That it's kind of wherever there's kind of a mix of action, that's like where the park should be, so that it's kind of maybe facing the most users, let's say.
Right.
Great. I want to go to one thing. Oh, Heather, sorry. Heather, Welcome. Thank you for joining us. And I don't know if you have a preference. I hopefully you were able to see the answers. I know they're kind of mixed in here with these letters.
Yeah, I think I got a good understanding. And I would echo what most people have said. I would vote for the kind of F and G combination.
Okay.
And I also like what Lund was saying about the kind of two smaller parks connecting. I thought that was interesting.
Mhm. Great. And I'll put this also likes idea of the parks connecting. One question I do have for people, and maybe there's just not a big strong preference one way or the other. It's like, whatever works is fine. When, one of the differences between G and F is that this would be a park or a plaza on Park Boulevard that connects to the large park alongside Matadero Creek at grade. So I think maybe this at grade piece, part of what's is trying to distinguish from is maybe this park that is described in F that's adjacent to Park Boulevard and then wraps around the creek at grade in the parking lot. And I think the distinction here is that this has the plaza as well. So they're kind of similar. Angela, do you have anything to add about the distinction between F and G?
Actually, they're very similar. We put G in because Waldeck really wanted to have the plaza on Park, not having a plaza like, in the old Fry's parking lot or whatever. So that was the original distinction. But if people have some slight variation on that, I'd love to hear what it might be.
Yeah. I think part of that too for the plaza is that, if a plaza is like, let's say a plaza is a place where certain types of activities are more easily facilitated than grass, having it be visible and not be hidden away, I think maybe is part of that. So even if it's within the larger park, that it's more adjacent to the street versus like in the middle of the park, where it might be not as visible to passersby. And people are like, where is that thing happening again? All right, so a lot of good answers from folks. I think we have some synergy around the Cloudera parking lot, whether it's for a large park or kind of that park would somehow expand even or have some connections, maybe connections even through the railroad spur, which could be a good north-south bike connection. And then I think a lot of synergy also around the kind of creek side, but adjacent to Park Boulevard, which again gives that park some good visibility so it doesn't feel like it's hidden. People don't often want to go to hidden parks. They want to go to places where they know they can see and be seen. Any questions for people or combinations that folks are seeing or suggestions that folks want to make to each other?
Well, I was very taken with Lund's idea of that and your comment that the railroad spur, which exists and I believe is in public right away, I'm not sure, is an opportunity. No. Okay, is an opportunity for connection between the center. Fry's has been this barrier, and so the railroad spur does kind of cut. If we have a way of going around the end of the global playground building, it kind of cuts through there and allows there to be a winding way through the site at least. Mm-hmm. So I was struck by that comment from my fellow participants and from you, Rachel.
Yeah, well, and I thought about, I think about Waldeck's proposal where I think he had a really strong north-south bike connection in his proposed version, and then kind of what Lund said and kind of what you said too about the park at Cloudera, kind of like how do we connect, right? So even if parks are smaller or larger, how are they connecting to each other? And these are some really good ideas, I think. Okay, any other comments or thoughts?
It has the potential, if we have a network of greenways through this neighborhood, of making it a really desirable and world-class neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Having a kind of a unique characteristic to this neighborhood.
Yeah, definitely. Any other comments for anyone else? We're gonna move on to the next question. Okay. We're gonna move on to question 15. What types of park space should count towards the 4 acres per 1,000 residents? And that is from the City of Palo Alto Comprehensive Plan, the 4 acres per 1,000 residents as the target and aspirational goal of development. A is privately owned open space accessible to the public. B is publicly owned parkland, C is a combination of both, and D is a new solution. And part of what this goes toward is, when we actually tally up, I think it goes towards two things. One is when we tally up how we are calculating, the plan and the open space provided, what gets counted as public parks and what does not. And then also it would go towards kind of what Alex touched on, which would be, if let's say a development is changing their land, would we require a land dedication where they actually dedicate a portion of that land to be public park land versus a setup where you might have the developer own the park land and develop it, but you require that it be publicly accessible, which has challenges, but is a way that sometimes cities will get the parkland developed, and they may not own it as a city. Okay, so it's a little bit technical for some people. Are like, why does this matter? But just want to get a sense from folks, and you may say, I don't care, or you may have questions. So if you do, please let me know. Does anybody feel moved to answer this first? You can just come off mute and answer it.
I originally, when reading this, said A. I now think a C, a combination of both, might be acceptable. However, there have been so many times when there is a public amenity that is not public. I've mentioned several times the courtyard by the cafe, on the little street, access street to Page. But that's not the only example. The public meeting rooms in the grocery outlet thing are not public. The public spaces in the development behind grocery outlet are not truly public. They're really only feel like they are accessible by the residents. And the same goes for the Muse. There is a Muse through that structure, but it really feels like you're trespassing if you ride your bike up that Muse, because you're going right past people's front doors. It sort of feels like you're walking on their front sidewalk.
You're right that it must be designed well and maintained.
And no limitations of plantings or enclosures that limit the public access.
Okay.
So rooftop gardens, obviously, in their nature, can never overcome that.
Yep. Yeah. Great points. Terry, do you want to go next?
Okay, I would probably go with B. I think I'm concerned about the deficit we are already experiencing in park space, and I would like to see more park space because they're in high demand. If you go to any park, I recently went over to College Terrace to try to use some of their tennis courts, and of course they just reopened them because of COVID. But there was a huge, it seemed like a huge line of people waiting to use these facilities, and I think the demand will only increase. So I think B is the best choice for me.
Great. Alex?
Yeah, so I don't think I have a strong opinion on this one. I guess I would say C, like
C?
A combination of both.
Okay. All right, Lakiba.
My initial choice is B, but I wasn't exactly clear on the benefits or not benefits of A, of privately owned open space. I don't know enough about that. If I did, perhaps I'd select C, but since I don't, I'm selecting B.
Yeah, I would say, just to editorialize, the downsides, I think, are what Kirsten said, which is that it can often end up becoming or feeling like it's not public. You can be in those places and be like, am I supposed to be here?
Okay.
And you know, there are things that over time can happen that can enhance that. The benefit as somebody who sometimes has to figure out budgets from a city perspective is sometimes you can get the private developer to pay for it. And so, and to maintain it, because it's not usually like building the park that's hard, it's maintaining it over time. And so sometimes, and if it's next to their development, it's in their best interest to make it look nice because they want to have it, you know, be nice.
So I might have C as a second.
Okay. Yunin?
Yeah, so my initial feeling is B, but if the reality is we might have some private owned space, but accessible by public, I think C is also okay.
Okay. And Heather?
I'd say C as long as it is reasonably open to the public.
You said, sorry, what one?
C, the combination of both, as long as it really truly is open to the public.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that and kind of goes to the design is the location. It has to be, I mean, I think, you know, for example, even though our consultants came up with, I think the idea of the interior courtyard is kind of a loser in that regard because it just is going to feel private. There's really not going to be a way to go around that. But if it's, you know, really close to the street, it abuts the sidewalk, you know what I mean? There's a pathway in, signage, you know, it really has to be pretty specific what you make that developer do. It has to be spelled out ahead of time. Otherwise they will not do it. So, and then has everyone gone? Did everyone get to share on this question? Lund, sorry, you didn't get to.
I haven't gone yet.
What is your preference?
You know, I'm comfortable with what you guys have been talking about. I think A can work, like you said, as long as there's parameters around it. And I do think it depends, like you said, is it close to the sidewalk? Does it feel accessible? Does it feel like it's welcoming? So that's obviously gets into the details. I'm fine with C too, a combination of both. I think given that Bulwer Park is already there, that already will be a component of the design is my guess, and expanding that. But I think if you were to add another park, maybe linear park, maybe realistically it becomes private, but it does need to feel like it's open.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like some of our linear parks might be kind of somewhat similar to the parkland that Cloudera has already developed and kind of has offered and maintained. So maybe building on some of that as a precedent would be a good idea.
It's interesting because the linear park has a strong benefit to the property owner. So they might be a better candidate for A-type land.
Yeah.
And the large park and or plaza has a greater benefit to the community and thus might be a better candidate for a B-type land use.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Great. Other comments that folks see, connections or questions for each other, concerns to raise? Yeah, I think the note about the linear park is a good one and very kind of nuanced, but also makes a lot of sense in terms of how we might think about that land when we necessarily need to cut across the property to create the connection, and do it in a way that is hopefully aesthetically pleasing as well. Great idea. All right, well, we're going to mosey on to the next question. What type of zoning should be considered for Olive? And so this assumes that no current residents will be required to leave for any of the options below, and that property owners can decide to make no changes at all, no matter the zoning. Natural, voluntary change, and attrition only. And the options are keep as the zoning as is, which would be that it would be a R1 single family zone, which is 1 unit per lot plus 1 accessory dwelling unit and 1 junior accessory dwelling unit, which is what's currently allowed. So A is just like no change scenario. B, allow 2-story cottage courts on contiguously owned properties, such as this image that is below here, which is, you can see these little cottages kind of facing a central open space. And that might be 3 to 6 units on 1 or 2 adjacent properties. C is allow redevelopment of single family homes into 4-unit buildings. And the image for that are here. And these are from Palo Alto that Angela has taken. So kind of house-like in appearance, but 4 units are there. Allow multifamily buildings on contiguously owned properties, such as the ones that are below. This is kind of like a townhouse style of 3-story development. And then here's a larger, I think it's 4 stories. One is on Alma and one is on Ramona. Then E is a combination of A, B, C, and D, and F might be new solutions. Anybody feel moved to speak first on this topic? If not, why don't you go first, Heather? Do you have a preference you'd like to share?
Not right off the bat. I would think a combination. So E would make sense just to be able to have the most options available, but interested to hear what others have to say.
Great. And one thing that might help you as you are thinking about your answer, I think Waldeck put this well in the last meeting, is to think about the maximum you'd be comfortable with. Because let's say you're okay with this 4-unit building. Well, that might happen, but it also might be that the single family homes stay. But if you're most comfortable only with single family homes, then you'd want to say A, because you wouldn't want to see letter C come to. So that's one way to think about it. But you can also change your answer as the conversation goes, not that you have to. Yunin, do you have a preference?
I think the first thing is I'm not sure what is the current residents, what's their preference. I think they should also have an opportunity to address their concerns. Besides that, I would think maybe the part close to El Camino Real, we can have something like B, like like a combination multifamily building there. And the rest of them, we can have maybe B, or
Yeah,
A or B. Yeah.
Did I capture that right? That the part closest to El Camino Real could be more like, did you say D?
Yes.
And then as you kind of go up the street, you'd get more B.
For the rest,
B and
maybe A or B. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Good suggestion. Lakiba, do you have a preference?
Okay, so I liked how you phrased that, like which one, I forgot how you said it, but which one would you really not like, however you said that. So, you know, I'm more flexible on this one than maybe I was when we initially started. I like A, however, I like what Yunnan just said, if the larger units, say, let me just scroll down here. I probably wouldn't like D, since that seems more than I would be comfortable with, but perhaps C, if it started farther away and then worked my way back to B with an occasional A, could work for me.
Okay, that makes sense. Great. Terry?
Okay, I had to unmute myself.
No
worries. I learned something at the last net NVCAP meeting, and that is that these lots apparently along Olive are very, very shallow. And I didn't realize that. I kept thinking about that a lot. And I kept thinking about how that would impact in terms of a multi-family facility or building of that nature. And I think the real choice there, if that the lots remain the same the way they are, and I assume they would be, I don't know, that A, what they are now, or B, maybe B might be an alternative, but A or B are the only choices that seem to fit in with that neighborhood. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so that's what I would choose.
Great. Kirsten?
So I always advocate for those that have lower incomes, and you know, and I want to have that diversity of income level in our thing. So I would say A doesn't allow more affordable houses because the biggest price of the house is the land that it's sitting on. And so that price is just going to continue to escalate unless you have more than one unit on that land. A does allow up to quote unquote almost 3 units, basically a house, an apartment, and an ADU. The apartment is a mini ADU or junior ADU. So I would say B through D, with prioritizing, with the caveat that B must increase the number of units. So if you're combining 2 lots and you're only making 3 units, I'd like to have that say 4 to 6 units on two adjacent properties and 3 units on a single property. Do you see what I'm saying? Because otherwise you're adding less units than the current R1 zoning.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then with the caveat, as Yunan so cleverly pointed out to us, that we probably would be more comfortable if somebody owns a couple of contiguous units that are within a couple hundred feet of El Camino. We probably would be very comfortable with D in that situation.
Yeah. I'm just going to put that particular note that you're kind of supportive of this idea of, sorry, I pulled your name wrong. Of like,
and I don't know if I said it right. I'm sorry.
No, that was great. Great. Alex?
Yeah, so I think I want to echo what Terry said about the shallow lots. You know, the lots are typically 50 feet, and the depth varies, but like 119 feet is normal, and some of them are smaller and some of them are larger. But that's not large enough to get a parking, like if you're trying to do your, like D, the multifamily, that's not large enough to get a parking aisle in efficiently.
Got it.
So I'm going to say, I think my answer is going to be C, like 4 units. And I could combine it a little bit with D. I just wanted to throw out, there's like I was looking at a nice block downtown today. It's like the 300 block of Emerson. And there are 50-foot similar sized lots. And there's like a $4 million single family house right next door to a Palo Alto Housing Corporation affordable project, which is 4 one-bedroom units on the same size lot. And they've been built over time over the last 120 years. And then they all sort of fit in together. They look good together. It looks like a single family neighborhood, but if you start counting doors, you'll realize that, you know, some of the places have 4 units in them. But it all looks like high quality. It all looks good. It all looks like a single family neighborhood.
Got it.
And then I also will say partly D, because I know that we have a lot of streets in like downtown north and say like on Homer Avenue as well as near downtown that have 50-foot lots with 3 units on them. But they have like multifamily zoning, like RM30, RM15 zoning. So I
Did
think
you
that's
say
also
E
viable.
or D?
It's D. Yeah, so it's C and D.
C and D, okay. And part of your reason, so I guess, can you help me understand, just to make sure I heard you right? I thought you earlier said D as in dog might not work because of the parking, but you're saying maybe it could work and there are some cases where it does. Is that what you were saying? Okay.
Yeah, I'm saying that I think the examples that you're showing there will not work, but there are
Okay.
smaller scale. There are other projects downtown that are smaller that do work. They're not as big as what you're showing.
Got it.
In those images. Yeah. Thanks.
Great. And Lund, best for last. This is your area. What do you foresee?
Great question. Okay, so actually, you all have a lot of really smart comments that honestly kind of encompasses how I feel about this as well. Just kind of interesting points to point out. So I believe that Sobrado does have a development on Olive closer to El Camino Real that's a multifamily. Is that correct?
Yeah.
I don't know what stage it's at, but I think at one point in time they were
Mike Spikes, right?
Yeah, Mike Spikes. So that's kind of in the same vicinity. So I think they are kind of doing what you're talking about on a certain stretch of Olive. Honestly, though, here's our latest thought on that. And Alex and Terry, you touched on this. So you are correct. The lots on Olive are shallow, and it makes it very challenging to do a bigger scale development there. So we've actually done a lot of research over the last several months, looking specifically at the sites we own there in Olive, and we own several houses there. And because of the zoning for single family allowing for 3 units, somewhere in that range is probably where we are looking at. So I think it's not feasible to do a larger scale multifamily development project. And I also, it's not in keeping with the neighborhood. And I think there's a lot of other things as well. But it seems like the A zoning does allow for some additional units. As you pointed out, there's ADU, JADU, and the single family. So we are looking seriously into that option right now.
And then with the A, what I kind of also heard you describe, it seemed like to me a little bit was also perhaps C, where it would maybe be 4 units, but still kind of the scale is the scale of like what we might think of as like a house. And I'm using air quotes over here. You can't see me, but.
I think there are alternatives out there that work with the shallow lot sizes. And so we're still we're still in the development phase and still kind of analyzing it. But it has become pretty clear that D on our lots, I'm not saying it doesn't work other parts of Olive, but D will not work because of the shallow lot sizes, and it also is not in keeping with the neighborhood. So we're leaning more in the direction of, what's interesting is actually number of units. If you look at A, B, even or C, it's not too different in terms of the actual, number of people and the number of units you're providing. It's basically 3 to 4 in that range.
That's true.
Or
So
3 to 6, I guess.
would you put yourself in this kind of A, B, C range? Would that be where you stay?
Yeah.
All right. Did everyone get to share? Heather, I'm going to come back to you, not because you have to say anything, but I don't know if you want to just share anything based on what you heard from others. Not that you have to change your answer or anything.
Yeah, I think I'm sticking with my answer, but I agree that sort of the bigger units might not really be feasible. So the A through C combo, I think, makes the most sense.
Yeah. So what I hear people saying, we kind of have everybody all over the board, but I think there's also a general recognition of just the constraints of the location might make A through C just more doable, even if we allowed, let's say, D. I think what might be interesting for D that Yunin pointed out is like that might work on the El Camino facing part of Olive. But, you know, once you kind of get back, you know, a few parcels, then it would really go back to the smaller scale. Does that sound right? That folks kind of mostly agree with that kind of assessment? I see Kirsten has the thumbs up. And we can do that kind of fine grain too, of looking at like, okay, this property's close to ECR, can have a little bit more, and you know, the rest could be a little bit smaller. I see some nodding, so I think that we feel good about that. All right, we're gonna move on to the next one. Okay, question 21. Should Olive be connected to 340 Portage if agreement can be reached with property owners? And so this is the idea that I think it could go a couple ways. You know, one would be working with property owners to have an easement that allows, let's say, a bike and pedestrian path to go, you know, on their property that connects from Olive through to 340 Portage site and on to whatever's on beyond that and back and forth. I mean, a more dramatic option would be to, you know, purchase a house from a property owner and demolish the home to create a pathway, especially if it was going to be a road. You would need probably a wider passageway than you might need for a bike or a pedestrian to get through. So that's kind of how I would see that. I'm open to other ways that could happen, but physically, I don't know how you'd get a car through otherwise, unless maybe it was a one-way and I don't know, cars of a certain size only or something. So we could have that be a connection that's for cars. It could be a connection that's for pedestrians and bikes only. It could be no connection at all. And again, other ideas about how we might make that work. Does anybody feel strongly about this or have ideas?
I could go. I think B might be the best choice. I mean, a bike and pedestrian path of some kind, if it's doable. I mean, obviously taking somebody's property is not desirable at all. But I don't think the whole purpose of this path, in my opinion, would be to accommodate people moving from the California Avenue area to this area. And a bike and pedestrian path might be the best way.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Terry. Anybody else want to go?
I'll go. I don't think it's necessary personally to have a path. I'm not saying it wouldn't be beneficial. So I'm leaning somewhere between B and C. I think if there is a path, if everyone feels very strongly that it should be there, obviously the big if is if an agreement can be reached with the property owners and it makes sense and all that kind of stuff. But if that's a necessary component of the plan, I think that's possible. But it should be for pedestrians and bikes, not cars.
Great, thank you. Alex.
Yeah, I think I'm a B on this one.
You said B?
Yeah, a B.
Okay. Great.
And I would just throw out there that maybe like 20 years ago, Stanford decided to put in a street grid, but only for pedestrian, bikes, and shuttles. And I think it's, you know, I think it's held up really well over the last 20 years. Like, it looks good. It makes it more easy. It's easy to get around the campus now and find, you know, in terms of like wayfinding. And they've kept the cars out of the main campus.
Cool. All right, Lakiba.
Okay. Well, I selected B, but I'm actually still kind of wondering if it's needed or is it for ease and traffic or allowing traffic to either pedestrians or bikes to come have another outlet. So I don't see it being used for cars.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm in the B or C area, but okay with B. as long as that could be worked out.
Yeah. So kind of like it's a nice to have, not a need to have.
Right, because why is that being suggested?
Yeah, I think part of it is what you hit on, which is and kind of Terry talked about that north-south connection across
Okay.
the site.
Yeah.
So that people would want to be able to travel via bike or walking to, let's say, Cal Ave or from Cal Ave to this area.
But even if they went through, they can't go across Oregon. They'd still
Yeah,
have
they'd have to go to Park Boulevard.
or turn on Page.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to your point, like, nobody would be coming through there from, I mean, part of it, and so, all of this is like one of those things where it's like, I always say the most common planning answer is like, it depends, right? So
Yes.
kind of depends on who we would be able to work with in terms of property ownership, right? To get the throughway.
Yeah.
Where it is. So, people are not at least supposed to be biking across here, right? I'm sure they do it anyways. They're taking their life in their hands, but
people do walk across there though.
Right. So if somebody walked here, and then, the straight lines, oh, that seems nice. Of course, it's like right through someone's house, right? So it's not great. And so, when they get here, is there a way for them to go this way, or do they have to go down to Park and then go this way?
Right.
So we did have, let's say, our nice park here, right? Our extension of Bullware. Is there a way to have some type of connection from here over here? Or is Park Boulevard the connection, right? And we've already talked a lot, and I think we will more about enhancing that connection as the way that people get north-south. Do we want a second way? This would be a second way to do the north-south. So.
Quick question, Rachel. Yeah. On that map, can you show where the Mike's Bikes development is slated to be?
I believe
it's right on that corner.
Isn't it right here? I think. No, here.
Moving target.
Yeah.
Here. I believe it's right here. Is that right, Teacher?
Wait. Is that Olive? Mike's Bike is on the corner of Olive and El Camino.
Yeah, that's this one here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's it.
And it kind of has a little bit of... Go ahead.
You're on
Rachel, there are Mike's Bikes. There are two buildings. One on El Camino and one on Acacia.
Yeah, it kind of stretches. There's like it's like an L shape. It's like here and then down this way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Maybe there's some connectivity through that. Maybe that doesn't help, but it's also, it goes kind of towards El Camino, but another possibility is having some connectivity different parts of the site.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. Yunin, do you want to share what you prefer, if you have a preference?
I also feel it's nice to have. It's not probably not yet. At least it's lower priority compared with other goal here. So maybe C looks to me. I would see. Yeah.
And part of it is, we can be opportunistic, right? If the opportunity presents itself, great. Or, if it doesn't, we'll, think of other things. Heather?
Yeah, so I would say it depends on what the ultimate plan looks like, but I agree B, but it's a nice to have, it's not necessary, but ideally B.
All right. Did everyone get to share? Kirsten, sorry.
That's okay. Could you put the map back up?
Yep.
So I feel strongly that the more you connect density with pedestrian bicycle friendly routes, the more you can keep there from being pedestrian automobile incidents, which often result in death. If the automobile is going over 35 miles an hour, it almost always results in death. So little known fact from my time at the bike, Safe Routes to School volunteering. So further down on the map is that site that I referenced earlier where we know we're adding housing and where we know that the primary way to cross El Camino, if you take your bike on the train and work at Stanford Research Park, the primary place to cross El Camino is that same crossing. And that crossing is slated to be improved for bicycle crossing. It's either Olive or Acacia, I think.
I think.
Do you remember where those
I
bicycle?
know there's something.
It's right here at Hanson and Portage.
Yeah. This.
Or yeah, I think it's at Hanson and Portage, and just south of there, where the Google map insignia is right now, is where this additional housing is going to go in. So I'm picturing, I feel strongly B, because I'm picturing that this is an essential connectivity from the train station to places of employment. Those people aren't necessarily going to want to go straight up Park. They have the option, but the more you can distribute the bicycles across several possible routes, the less density of bicycles you have, and thus the less bicycle automobile interactions. So I feel strongly B. I'm not really happy with C. I don't know that I could be convinced to A. Maybe. I can't really picture a scenario where I'd say A, so I'm strongly B.
Okay. Any questions or comments that you have for each other or commonalities you're seeing? All right. It sounds like overall what I'm hearing is like we have some people who are like, yeah, it's nice to have, but we don't need to have it. But some people kind of even in the B saying it would be for, if we did have it, it would be for pedestrians and bikes only. We have nobody supporting A. So I think that's pretty clear. Great. All right, we're gonna move on to the next one. Question 22. How much parking for cars should be included in each housing unit? None. 1 parking space per unit. 1.25 to 1.75 spaces per unit. 2 spaces per unit. Current 2-bedroom requirement is what this would reflect. 1 parking space for each bedroom, capped at 2 spaces per unit. So if it was a 1-bedroom, it would have 1 parking space, but the 2-bedroom would have 2. If it was a 3-bedroom, it would still have 2 parking spaces. Other ideas that folks might have. And then what we realized, I think somehow got cut off perhaps, was this chart from the packet, I think. We weren't sure why that happened, but it did, unfortunately. So this is a example of the parking requirements from the SOFA area. So if you can't see it, I apologize. I will try to, and also now it's like getting cut off, double cut off here. Okay, does anybody feel moved to start with this question? Got an answer that they want to share? All right, why don't we have Yunin, why don't you share first?
I think I would choose C or D.
Okay. C or B?
Yeah.
You want to say anything about your choice?
The fourth choice, D.
Oh, D, sorry. D and B are sounding very similar to me tonight. I don't know why, but you want to say anything about your choices?
I know there are some thoughts on this regarding how many parking we need. I think from my perspective, we cannot assume people live close to California train station. They don't need a car. In most cases, I see they don't drive, but at least each family has at least 1 car.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for each unit, at least 1 space. But in most cases, each family, they just have 2 cars. So that's why I choose. That's why if the C comes to my mind, that is some number between 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know for the guideline for existing these multi-use buildings, what is the number there? But I always feel when you go to hearing, you can see people, they feel this number is not, that's my overall feeling.
When I'm sorry, you said people do not think that what number is doable?
Public hearing to the new buildings, when they propose for how many parking should be assigned for each unit, the number, when you go to public hearing, they always feel this number is not enough. I mean,
Yeah.
they want more parking space.
Got it. Yes, indeed. That is frequently the case. Okay, thank you. Heather.
So I'd say tentatively E, but I think ideally we should be coming up with some way to incentivize either the building managers or the renters to not take a parking space and either cut rent or come up with some other way to make that more popular.
Great.
Heather, really quick question. Did you say B or E?
I said E.
Oh, E, okay.
We might have to do like E as in everybody, B as in boy. So if I get your letter wrong, just help me know what you're saying. Len, since you were just talking, do you want to share your preference?
Sure. On this one, I might be different than everyone, go against the grain a little bit. I've just seen kind of the trend here is, sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts here, but I would lean more towards B. I think that parking is changing. I think a lot of people I know, kind of new generation, don't even have a car, especially this is potentially walking or biking distance to the train. I know that's all changing now too with COVID, so I'm not quite sure how this is all going to shake out, but I do think in order to incentivize development, parking is one of those huge constraints to development. And if we want to get a lot of housing units here, I think we have to have a very kind of robust transit management program where people don't drive as much as possible. So I think we really should try to make it as few spaces as possible per unit.
Okay. Terry?
Okay, I probably favor maybe a combination of E and D.
Okay.
E as in Edward and D as in dog. I think I used to live in apartments for a long time. So I know the demands for parking. My job was sometimes in different places. Sometimes it was in Cupertino. Sometimes it was in various parts of the Bay. And so the only way to get there was by car, really, logically. And I think with our current COVID situation and also with the demands, I think it's inevitable that people will want to, I hate to say this, go back into their cars again. And the fact that our transportation system is very weak, BTA is a very poor system, I think that also drives people away. So I think unless we can fix those things first, and I don't know if there's the political will to do that, I think having either one car for one bedroom or 2 cars for 2 bedrooms makes a lot of sense. So
Great. Thank you. Lakiba, did you share? No, I don't think so.
Not yet.
Do you want to go ahead? Did you want to share, Lakiba? You're on mute again if you're talking.
Sorry. I I was leaning toward, realistically, I think people need 2 spaces. However, I'm leaning toward 1 space, just to keep the parking somewhat contained, but I have empathy.
Okay, so I'll put you here, but I'll say you have empathy for having the 2 spaces.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when you say keep the parking contained, you mean like not having just like lots and lots of parking?
Yes. And really going back to Lun's point that the parking takes up a lot of the space.
Yeah, yeah. Good point. Kirsten?
So I would say I'm pretty much a little B and F.
Okay.
So B, 1 space per unit, guaranteed. Everybody gets at least 1 parking space. Unless there's 3-bedroom units. I can see in a 3-bedroom unit maybe needing two spaces. Or 1.75. But I think perhaps, and this could speak to the developer's concerns too, is that maybe we could create an incentive for purchase spaces where you could purchase an apartment and then purchase an additional space if you're really invested in having 2 automobiles. And also as an amenity, maybe have some additional spaces that are designated as car share spaces.
Oh, yeah.
So if there's 1 space per unit, but there's spaces for purchase if you really need one, and if there's car share spaces if you really need a car just for the weekends or just for the week. I mean, basically that gives you a lot of flexibility and gives you a financial win for building that space, which is a very expensive thing to build. A parking space, I think, is like 100,000 or more to build.
Yeah.
So.
Another thing that came up in the last meeting, just to kind of throw out to see if you all have any thoughts about it. Actually, Alex, why don't you go first, Alex, and then I'll bring up some of the ideas from the last group. Sorry, I always am skipping one person this meeting. Sorry about that, everybody.
Bad girl.
Yeah, I think I think my thoughts are similar to Kirsten, so that's B and F. And I just want to throw out there, so say like in downtown Berkeley, in their core downtown area, it's 1 parking spot for 3 units, but the developer has to provide free unlimited bus passes to everybody in the building. There's a schedule. There's a ratio of the number of car shares that there has to be in the building, and that's provided, free to the car share company. I mean, the tenants would still have to pay membership fees, but that's provided free to the car sharers. In other areas, like just a little bit outside of the downtown core in Berkeley, it's 1 per unit. And I think, Palo Alto is not there yet, but I think I mentioned that because I hope that we can get there somehow.
Great, thank you. One thing that came up in the last meeting was the idea of having parking maximums so that we could say, for example, the maximum is letter E, one space per bedroom, or letter D, or whatever it was. But then the developer could decide based on the demand how much to build. And that can be controversial for some folks, but I think on the other side is that when developers are looking at the market and saying, okay, what do my renters or my owners want? And if they see, well, people who are buying my product want 2 parking spaces, they'll build the 2 parking spaces. If they're seeing, oh, people who are going to buy or rent my unit want 1, or we need about 1.75 or what have you, then they'll build that. But it kind of gives them a ceiling versus a floor. Just an idea. It was just thrown out by one working group member, so it wasn't like overwhelmingly supported, but curious to see if folks have any thoughts about that or you're just like, oh, whatever.
Seems like a good idea to me.
I really like the idea because the developers are paying so much for their land of having some for sale parking spaces for some reason. I don't know why that is. Does that ever happen? I'm curious.
Yes, yes.
Mhm. Yeah, one way people do it sometimes, cities will do what's called, there's a couple ways to do it. So one is that, like, let's say it was a place that had like this 1.75 per unit, right? Which obviously you're going to end up with, if you then say to your tenant or rent or purchaser, hey, with your space, with your, unit, you get one parking space. And if you want another one, you can, buy it for this much, or maybe it's visitor parking or what have you. Another way cities will do it sometimes is require what's called unbundling of parking, which is to say, okay, yes, you're buying a condo, but if you want to buy a parking space, it's an additional XXX dollars. I think some of the challenges can be from a neighborhood perspective. Folks might say, well, yeah, what's going to happen is the person is going to have a car, not want to pay for the space and just park it on the street. Which can be a problem if it happens too much, and then there's limited parking, but it is a public street, and so people are allowed to park on it. But you can also have parking permit programs and other things that can limit that type of thing. So you kind of have to have a whole package to do that. I'll say two people okay with the idea of parking maximums. Okay, well, any other questions or comments for each other or thoughts that you guys want to share? Things you're saying? Seems like we have pretty good support for at least one space per unit, and then some openness to kind of having it at the, more 2 spaces per unit, and some combinations, right? Like maybe it's a 2, maybe it's the bedroom count, maybe it's capping it at 2, something that's in there. So maybe those are kind of the 2 poles, like the 1 and then like the more than 1, but open to some ideas. Okay. Move on to the next question. Which is, I'm going to move this onto the same page here. If Portage Avenue continues to exist between Ash and Park, going through an area that could include housing, parkland, and retail, how should it be designed? And so just to refresh what we're talking about, we're talking about Portage Avenue, which continues here and then comes out here. If it continues to exist, how should it be designed? Should it be designed for all vehicles, including cars, with traffic calming measures? To include cars only on a very limited basis, such as morning deliveries. C, for bike and pedestrians only, with car access for emergencies, and deliveries could happen in the railroad spur or rear of the building, or a new solution. Anybody feel moved to go first with this question?
I'll go.
All right.
So I found it very difficult to answer this question in isolation, and I didn't circle any of the answers.
Okay.
I think you have to look at how the neighborhood breathes, like traffic in, traffic out, traffic across, before you can answer this question. If Portage closed, Acacia, and that really puts a lot of pressure on Olive and Lambert. And are we comfortable with that? Like, are the people on Olive and the businesses on Lambert comfortable with, they are the way in and out? They are the through roads in and out. That's going to become greater. The pressure on those 2 streets is going to become greater. And are we okay with that? I'm somewhat inclined to think that with narrow enough car space, with traffic slowing, textured pavement, physically separated pedestrians from, like, by bollards or a curb or a planting strip, physically separated pedestrians from cars, and a very narrow car thoroughfare. And I said in one of the earlier meeting, I'm influenced by coming back from Amsterdam, where very slow speed cars often share space with bicycles. I'm inclined to say that the neighborhood might function a bit better with Portage as a slow speed through road.
Okay.
Alternatively, we have to really be conscious of what we're doing to Olive and Lambert, which is why this was a hard question to answer.
Okay.
So I would say car friendly from El Camino Real to Ash, and then bike and ped prioritize, but some throughput from Ash to Park.
Great. So I think that's a great response. And one thing that folks may think about, I know we didn't have a specific question in this round, but we have talked about it previously. And I guess I'll just say what I had assumed from those previous conversations, but we can talk about more now and also possibly at our next meeting, is that there had been a lot of support for trying to eliminate cut through traffic. And there were some schemes around like these streets could be one way. The other way to do it and to prioritize Park as a bike boulevard would be just to essentially make Olive a cul-de-sac and maybe even Lambert a cul-de-sac so that people aren't trying to get from El Camino through there to Park. So if that were to happen, either of those, which folks on Olive may say, I don't want this to be a cul-de-sac, like, are you kidding? Then Portage becomes the through street, which to Kirsten's point could be developed as kind of a slow street, right? Where it's really not ideal to cut through because it's like not a fast way. It does mean that there still is a curb cut here from, you know, this property onto Park, which people may want to just close all of these access points and not have any vehicular traffic from Lambert, Portage, or Olive, you know, getting yeah.
The group, I think, has expressed a priority for there being some kind of neighborhood serving retail, some cafe, some kind of dry cleaner, something that is part of the gathering function. And it's a lot to ask people of all abilities to walk or bike to retail.
Yeah. So I think Kirsten made a thoughtful response. And again, folks can expand just to the specific question, or if you had like a larger scheme that you were thinking of when you're answering it, it's great to express that so we can kind of understand what your thoughts are. So I'll toggle back to this page, but if you want to use the map when you provide your answer, let me know and I can go back to that. Does anybody want to go next? Okay, I will call on someone. Alex?
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion at the moment on this one. I think I've been doing some sketches and I've been thinking, I guess that I would do a D solution, which would be maybe to allow cars into 340 Portage on Park. But we prevent people from doing the cut through from El Camino to Park, right? So
you could turn, you could turn from Park onto Portage, but you couldn't turn the other way. You couldn't come through ECR.
I've also been thinking about, like, I generally don't like dead ends, and so I've been thinking, like, if you come down Portage, that somehow that there's like a way that there's like a loop road, like maybe Portage and Acacia connect somewhere. So you can actually circle around the block.
Okay.
But maybe that doesn't connect anywhere else in the neighborhood.
So you come down Portage. Would you come down all this way and then there's like a loop here that you then turn around? Or would the loop be?
Well, so this is what, like, you know, I was saying, like the South Park thing. I was thinking that there'd be like a park and you could circle around the park and then get out back onto El Camino or Acacia.
Okay.
Right.
Cool.
But there wouldn't be, yeah.
Alex, would you go all the way up to Park? And I kind of like this little U-turn or turnaround thing. Would you go across where it says Ash on the map, or would you go across where it says Park on the map?
Oh, yeah, I will have to send. I'll send you a little sketch. I was actually thinking that there's one you could go in one way from Park and turn into Fries.
Ah,
And then you
Come
could
down.
connect, you could be able to go through Portage out to El Camino,
Uh-huh.
right? So you could go whatever, west or south,
Right.
but you wouldn't be able to do that the other way, right? Because everybody right now wants to avoid the Page Mill and El Camino traffic, right? So they cut through the neighborhood. And so I would design it so that you couldn't do that.
Okay.
thank you, Alex, for clarifying. I
We kind of come
understand.
down here, and then also if there's a park here, which I know it's hard to imagine because there's all this stuff here right now, but if there's some open space, but there's a way to get to the open space in your vehicle, but you have to turn around. You can't go on through to park. It doesn't become a cut through. But it's also not totally a dead end. Okay, anybody want to go next?
I'll go.
Thank you.
Just on that map before, it seemed that if you can come one way, but you can't go the other way,
Mm-hmm.
then the traffic will continue to cut down Olive, which is what they do anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? So traffic trying to avoid Page Mill makes that right on Olive and that
Right.
left on Ash.
Uh-huh.
So if you make them unable to go in the other direction, that could potentially push more people to cut through on Olive and Pepper.
Mm-hmm.
Also, one thing is that for people that live in that neighborhood, it's sometimes hard to get to El Camino to go south. So we often cut through and go down we go down that street by Fry's.
You go down Portage or do you go down Lambert?
Yeah, we go down Portage because there's a light
Right.
and it enables you to get out on the freeway. So I a little bit
Do you guys
like,
come down Park Boulevard and then go down through the parking lot?
say it again.
Do you come down like Park Boulevard and then
Yes.
go down to through Portage and then turn
Yes,
to go south?
because
Yeah.
that's the way you can get out. You can get out on Lambert, but it's a little bit more cautionary.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And it's not as clear that you can actually come out.
Yeah.
Where at the light, it's very clear that you can cut across. You can get out on El Camino. Okay, so I was just thinking those thoughts, but what did I initially write? Yeah, I think it depends on, of course, what's in the area. I guess personally, I'm used to having access. So if it did still go from Park to El Camino, that potentially could work for me personally. So I selected B, kind of potentially including them only on a limited basis. I'm not sure what would be in there. Would it be housing or businesses of some kind? Not sure. And I also like C, just in case we want no cars going in that area.
Okay. I think you raise a good point about thinking about the circulation though, right? Of how people are getting from, I mean, how the current residents, let alone if we have more residents, like how they're gonna get from the housing, you know, wherever it may be, out to go both north and south on East Star and or, you know, on Oregon Expressway Page Mill. Because when they're going anywhere in the region or in the rest of the town, they're going to need to probably do that, right? So
absolutely. And we've learned that maybe from 2 to 6 or so, it's hard getting out on El Camino. So you have to find a light, a way, to either go right or left. And sometimes that light at Portage is the way to get out there.
And lunchtime too, I've noticed it's really hard to cross at lunchtime to get, if you're trying to go south.
I don't even go in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yunan?
I think that all depends on how is this whole area is designed. I mean, this price lot, how is it designed? Because I assume there will be more residents here. So for this particular road, to be realistic, it has to be with vehicles. Otherwise, I assume the residents, they coming and out, they will need some access to the El Camino Real and the Park Boulevard. So I'm also thinking about the circulation of the traffic here. I agree. So like Olive and the Portage, and the other road, what is the name? The Lombard. These three road, and we need at least one road has the traffic light to allow cars to turn left to the El Camino, the southeast bound, right? And honestly, I feel if we don't allow the traffic coming from El Camino to the Portage, a lot of traffic will be flowed to Olive and the Lombard.
Yeah.
So I think that it all depends on how many residents we're going to put in this area. Yeah.
So I think kind of trying to say, like, we want to balance also, like, to prevent overflow traffic going to Lambert and Olive. So yeah, it may be nice to have limited traffic on Portage, but the traffic may go somewhere. So we have to be conscious of that. Well stated. Terry, do you have a preference?
Yeah, this is a very tough question, and I think everybody's already said what they, pretty much what I was going to say, which was a lot depends on what the final design looks like, and having access out of Portage may be a necessary alternative, because people do have to go south and north, and with the light already there. So I think it really depends. I mean, I think ideally B might be a good choice in terms of the homeowners that live in the area, but it's really hard to say until a design, or until we have a better view of what the future is.
Yeah. Okay. Heather, do you want to share?
Yeah, I'm going to echo what a lot of other people have said. I think it's a little difficult to make a decision at this point in the planning process, but it sounds like there's going to need to be at least some traffic. So it sounds like B is going to be necessary, if not A.
Yeah. I think that time I got everybody. Did I? Yes.
You didn't get me, but that's okay.
Oh, no.
I agree with
Not
Heather.
one person. Okay, go.
I agree with Heather. That's it.
Okay. All right. All right, Lund, second Heather. I mean, I'm trying to like move around, so I'm not like always having you guys go in the same order, which is why I always end up being like, who did I forget to ask? Okay, yeah. So I think, I think one thing that's sticking out to me is like this idea that, again, my favorite planning answer, it depends. I think there is a desire to, I think what I would say, building on some of our previous answers and the previous designs, if there is a park, you know, adjacent to the creek, I think there's kind of this desire for some slower traffic here, something that is enhancing and not detracting from the park use. But we want to have people who live there be able to get to places. We want to have people who live there get out to El Camino. This is a stoplight, which is like very expensive. So like, let's make the best of it versus making it not useful. And so I think I hear from folks like a desire to, if there is a traffic through here, how do we enhance it? And then of course, making sure we're very mindful of Olive, Lambert, and the ways that people who live here are going to be using the street, not just the people who are cutting through, right? Like, yeah, there's people cutting through, but there's also people living there getting around. And so we have to kind of take all of that into consideration. Any other ideas that came to people or common threads you're seeing, questions you want to ask each other or anything?
Just to bear in mind that offices, it's not just residents, that if we want retail, we have to let customers get to the retail.
Yeah.
And I know like my dad can only walk like 2 blocks at the most, and it's a little scary watching him do that. So there are times I'm that person taking my car everywhere.
Yeah.
And so for differently abled people, you know, in wheelchairs, sometimes the mobility changes aren't as easy.
Yeah. And maybe there's some other things we can do. I mean, I don't know if people like speed bumps or speed humps or whatnot, but there's other traffic slowing things that keep traffic open, but make it so people aren't going to try to use it as a shortcut, right? Because it's just not as desirable.
Well,
but
cobblestone streets, I mean, there's a few cobblestone streets left in San Francisco. You go pretty slow on those ones.
That's true. There we go. We'll have a few potholes in the street. Just kidding. That's not what you said. Okay. I know it's 7:30. I usually try to take a break at 7. I need a little bit of a bio break. Do you folks want to take a 5-minute break and come back? Okay, we'll do a 5-minute break. So try to come back at 7:32, I guess, 33. For those who may be back, when you're back, if you want to just come on video, if you're on video or off mute, and we'll get started, and we'll just kind of let folks trickle in.
Je suis. Here I am.
Great, thank you, Kirsten. Okay, Lakiva's here. What? Okay, we'll just wait for the last two folks. If they're not here in a minute or two, we may get started. But hopefully everybody is weathering the pandemic okay, and you and your family are well, and at least we have a little bit of summertime, nice weather, so that's good.
It's strange, isn't it? I mean, we're just living through such a historical moment, not a pleasant historical moment, but it is interesting.
One for the ages, yeah. Yeah, it's certainly not like anything I had ever imagined. And like, I'm kind of a person, I like to watch all those movies that are like, oh, like what if there was some disaster and like the world changed, you know? And then it's like, this is like way less, it's like worse and like not as fun as any of those movies, you know? So it just means like stay at home and work on your computer all day and don't see people. And unfortunately, lots of people passing away. And this thing just kind of spreading despite some of our best efforts. So. All right, we've got Lund and Yunin. Great, excellent. Thank you all. Okay, so we only have a few more questions left just to preview kind of where we are in this evening. We got a question about 340 Portage, that building. Two questions really in a row. What you'd like to see there and kind of the zoning for that. And then looking at the Cloudera site, as well as talking about a little bit of the building design and massing. And this is a question about office square footage. We talked about that last time, but it's trying to kind of take another angle at the office, what kind of offices we'd want, and or other types of uses such as retail and things. So that's what we've got ahead of us. So we'll try to chomp that down. We're going to have another public comment portion. So for our attendees who are here, if you'd like to make public comment at the end, if you can raise your hand now, just so we can see how many folks we have and we can time ourselves appropriately. And of course, if as the night goes on, you decide you want to and you didn't raise it now, that's totally fine too. But it just helps us plan our time. Thank you, Ellen, for that. All right, so we will dive in. Question 24.1. The buildings at 340 Portage, the main building and the old dormitory office building have been found to be eligible for listing in the California Register of Historical Resources. What would you like the working group to recommend regarding the cannery buildings at 340 Portage? Do you want A, to retain and adapt all of the current buildings for reuse as housing or current retail or offices? So you may want to retain them and adapt them, and maybe you have some specific uses that you'd like to propose, or of those uses, there's some that you're in favor of and others you're not. So you can share that in your answer. Would you like B, retain and adapt certain historic building features, such as monitor roof buildings, the old dormitory, or portions of buildings? Would you like C, to recognize and commemorate the history of the site while allowing and encouraging the replacement of all buildings on the site? There should be a period here. Or D, other solutions. And I know this is something that folks have included. Some of you who created your own versions of the plan have included one way or the other. And then again, if you want me to go to the map at all, this is obviously the 340 Portage building, the main building, and then the dormitory or office building is here located. All right, does anybody want to start? All right, seeing none, we are going to start at the top of my list. That looks like lunch at the top of my screen.
I could
Oh,
start
Terry,
if you'd like.
Yes, Terry, go ahead.
Earlier today, I hope everybody got that email that I sent out. I sent out an email explaining why this particular site is so significant, not only to Palo Alto, but to California and to even our nation. This is truly one of the last, I believe, significant cannery sites, probably in California. And I hope you all had an opportunity to read the email and read the letters and also look at the pictures, because the pictures show one of the historical sites, which is down in San Jose, which is slowly, rapidly deteriorating, and within a few years will undoubtedly be gone. And this opportunity at 340 Portage is very unique to us in Palo Alto, because we've been fortunate over the years that even though this site has somewhat changed, I won't say entirely, but even though it has somewhat changed, it remains essentially what it was nearly 100 years ago, which is a cannery building. And if you've been inside, which I think many of you have, the Fry's building, it has a very unique design and the unique truss system. So I won't belabor it any more than I have to, but I want to make sure that this message is reached across this working group, that this is a very important historical building. And it should not be overlooked in any way. Even though it looks ugly on the outside, it's not the prettiest building to look at. It is very historic, and for many, many reasons. So I do support the option A, of course, and I will end my discussion now.
Thank you, Terry. Anybody want to go next?
If you want, I can go. Rachel, you called on me, I think, right?
Sure, yes, I did.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank Terry. That was informative. I read the attachments you sent over and the pictures, and it is super interesting. And just hearing about all the different historical significance of this site over the course of the last several months has been interesting. I definitely agree that the significance of the site should be commemorated. I don't feel as strongly as Terry does about it being the physical building. I know Terry has great reasons for that, and I think there's other ways to commemorate it. I do think potentially retaining the current building is possible, right? If it stays as office and it kind of just stays in place the way it is, I think that's possible. In my opinion, I think Tim Steele has expressed this in the past as well, to readapt the building for apartment use or even retail use, I think is probably not realistic, probably not feasible. If it stays as office, I think it's possible. But if we want to have a big kind of housing push on this site, I think retaining the structure makes that almost impossible in a significant way to add a ton of housing. I could be wrong, but I think it makes it very, very challenging. So that's my main reservation with retaining the building, is if we do want to make a big significant dent in the housing supply, I think that makes it challenging. So I think we have to choose almost one or the other, which is the priority. So I don't know. I guess I probably lean more in the direction of B or C. But I could also go along with A if office is retained at the site. That's obviously, at the discretion as well of the current owner. So I don't know how that would play out.
Great, thank you, Len. Does anybody else want to go next? Kirsten?
I feel like a broken record because I say this a lot. It's very easy to erase charm. It's very hard to create charm. It's very easy to erase history. It's very hard to remember history. I don't know if any of you know that there's a site on Charleston as it bends around towards San Antonio where the transistor was invented, but nobody knows that because all there is a plaque. Okay. There's no sort of real recognition of the history of that site. And I truly believe that it is more challenging than people realize to create an interesting and diverse streetscape. And the streetscapes that people like the most are the ones with a variety of periods of buildings and architectural styles. There is trendiness in design as there is in everything. How many times have I heard the word, I want modern farmhouse, which doesn't mean anything to anyone else, but to someone who's in design is like, oh, I know exactly, black trim, gray roof, white walls, wood accents, boom. Like, thank you, Chip and Joanna Gaines. And we're not immune to that as designers and as architects and as building designers. And the way to rein us in from succumbing to the latest trend and creating a mid-century modern revival neighborhood and then creating the next trend neighborhood is to retain some of all of the periods of history. And so I would advocate strongly for A, with the caveat that if the section of Global Playground is pretty much updated, the monitor roof is pretty iconic, the dormitory building is pretty iconic, I would say that I'm least attached to the section of the building that is abutting directly on Park where the cable co-op is, because I believe that that is an opportunity for a little more height in housing, and a little more height in housing would be difficult to achieve while retaining the shell. It's facadism. I'm okay with facadism, but I do think I would say if it would incentivize the property owner to be allowed some additional height at one end of the lot, I guess I would be okay with that. So that would lead me to be A and a little B.
Okay, so I want to make sure I capture what you're saying. Okay, so you're for retaining it. It seemed like you were also emphasizing particularly keeping certain portions, but you'd prefer to keep all of it. Is that right?
I'm very, very open to keeping all of it if it's at all economically viable. However, if to make keeping the monitor roof section, the already updated section, meaning the global playground section, and the dormitory building as the heart of the historical vibe of the neighborhood, I'm okay with adding some additional height on the end by Park Boulevard in order to make that economically viable.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. Hopefully I captured most of that there. Anybody want to go next? All right, Alex, you're next, right below Kirsten on my screen. So for Kirsten, sorry, I keep butchering your name. I know everyone does that. It's probably really annoying, Kirsten.
Okay, so I think I'm in agreement with Lund on this one. There are several other cannery sites that have already been redeveloped. So say for example, in Sunnyvale, like the Libby's cannery, they only retained the water tower, and then everything else was torn down. Like at the Del Monte cannery in San Jose, they saved some of the columns, and they saved a bridge, and they put those at the entrance to the new development. Or say like Monterey's Cannery Row, they put in design guidelines for the whole district to try to keep the aesthetic that allowed for new buildings in there. So that, I think the Monterey thing, I think would be a D. I think in Monterey, they use similar compatibility standards that Palo Alto uses in our zoning. And I definitely agree with Lund on the sort of the infeasibility of housing in the existing price building.
Okay. And then let's do sorry. All right, hopefully I'm capturing what you're saying, Alex, that you both, I put you under, when you said you agree with Lund, I put you under C, commemorate and recognize the history of the site. And you kind of gave some examples of that where parts of the building were adaptively reused, but like not most of it. Like there was some integration of selected pieces. I would say even a lesser degree of letter B, but maybe you were intending letter B. And then I'm putting you near Lund on letter A, saying that if the building is kept, having housing in that building is probably not likely the use of it. Does that sound right? Okay. Okay, Lakiba.
Okay, just one question on the Monterey Cannery Row. Does that include housing? Or
I don't think there's housing there.
okay. So in general, I lean toward A, just in terms of keeping the history in some real form. I lean toward that. So part of my concern is if we can't put housing, where are we going to put the housing? So I'm perplexed in how to maintain this part of history in the physicality of a building that could house people if we changed it up. So I'm in a bit of a quandary. I know how important it is, though, to mark spots of history.
Yeah.
I've seen places gone. And so just like someone else said, there's a little plaque, but people don't really see the plaque. They don't really remember. So I'm a little torn, to be honest. If I had to...
What did you think about Kirsten's idea? Which I feel like maybe you and her are somewhat aligned. I don't want to say that you're exactly the same, but she was saying, well, if you had to, though, you could keep some portions, so kind of a little bit of B, where some portions of the building are retained, and then a little bit of it maybe is not. So specifically, if we look here, here's this global playground, or we talk about butchering names. Their name is Playground Global, but I think we always call them Global Playground, which just makes more sense, right? You'd have a global playground anyhow. This is their section of the building, I think, for the most part.
Yeah.
Then you have the monitor roof section here. You can kind of see where this roof is different.
Yes.
And then I think Kirsten was saying, but like, let's say some portion of this perhaps could be demolished, and then that also helps create money to restore this
The
area.
part that's closer to Park Boulevard.
Yeah.
Right.
Is
And
that
also, that could be maybe taller and be housing, and then that would allow those people to use bikes and walk to the train station.
Is that B?
Yeah, I think it's a
Or
kind
is
of a
that
very,
D?
I would
That's
say it's
Kirsten's B.
I think it's a very specific phrasing of B.
Okay.
It's like it's B. I would say it's probably B, but I think Kirsten put some more color on it. Yeah.
Okay, I can get to B,
Okay.
that concept.
B based on Kirsten's idea above. Great. Okay. Heather, do you want to share?
Yeah, so I'll try and be fast. I agree with Alex and Lund pretty much exclusively. I would love to have A be the option, but I just don't think it's feasible. I would like to retain as much as possible, but if it's just not gonna work for the housing that we need and the other plans, then I'm okay with C.
Okay, I'll put you on both. I'll say Heather, and then Heather. C, okay, and then Yunin.
Yeah, it's really hard to choose our housing need.
Yeah.
But I will still choose A, as I think this is the only place that can still keep the history, but we still have other places in Palo Alto can provide housing.
Yeah.
Now you're making me want to choose A, you know.
I was thinking I heard that there are some other rebuild projects in the old community center on Middlefield. They have a huge land. Maybe some part of it can be the housing, and we can move that community center to this price lot. I'm just thinking.
Sorry, what's at the community center? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
The old one on Middlefield, that's close to Mountain View. There are several empty buildings there.
Coverly, I think.
Probably, yes. There used to be a high school there, yes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Kind of like maybe that's an area that could have more housing and then have the community center be located elsewhere. Is that?
If a lot of other places are thinking to rebuild or remodel, maybe we can think them together. So this North Ventura project doesn't have to be an isolated plan. We can plan it together with other place.
Yeah.
It's just some wild thoughts on my mind.
Yeah, I mean it's a wild thought, but it's not the craziest thing. I think there have been some plans, especially before COVID, to explore housing at Coverly. Some people were in favor of that, some people were not in favor of that, and right now that's kind of all on pause, as you can imagine, and lots of changes with Coverly. But I think the idea of kind of like similar to the park discussion we had, of thinking about how to think a little bit globally, and by globally I mean with the rest of the city, right? Like, how do we have housing everywhere that we need it, not just one place? So we will certainly be doing that soon with our housing element. So more to come imminently in that regard. But I think that makes a good point. So I think everyone's gone. I think this time I did get everybody without missing anyone. I think we see a lot of support for retaining, I think with different levels. So I think Terry definitely retain, and Yunin, maybe I'll just start grouping people a little bit, help my memory later on. Wanting to retain. I think Lund and Alex saying, well, if it is retained, we need to kind of part with our idea that it's going to be adaptively reused into housing. And so we need to kind of know what we're saying when we choose that. And then Kirsten and Lakiba, I think, saying, let's make sure we at least keep these most important ones in the whole building if we can. But, you know, if not possible, let's like try, they're kind of like B, but they really like want to emphasize the retaining as much as possible, I think, element. I think London, Heather, were also kind of in that camp, but more leaning towards, but if we can't do it, then let's go to C, where we are, you know, and Alex down there to say, let's commemorate. So I think we have a pretty fair spread, and I think that's pretty fair across the whole working group. Like if we were to bring the other group in here with us, kind of a similar, you know, I would say between C and A are kind of where most people are, with a little bit of people in the middle. So great. And then just time check, it's 7:59. I see that Cedric has his hand. I think Ellen, you used to have your hand up, but if anybody else does want to share on public comment, please raise your hand. So we'll have enough time, but we have a little bit of time. I think we may be able to finish, knock on wood. We may be able to finish, we'll see. Famous last words though. All right. Just gonna move this to the next page. Okay, so the next comment, the next question kind of builds on that idea about what happens at 340 Portage. And again, feel free to vote for more than one if you feel comfortable with it. What zoning policy for 340 Portage would you like? Do you think would lead to the best results for the NB cap? Again, this is thinking about, you know, what do we allow? If zoning is what is allowed on a site, what would be allowed to be there? Even though the previous one was kind of saying, what do we hope will be there a little bit, right? And we can use zoning to try to bring that to fruition. So letter A is to enforce the 30 dwelling units per acre for the zoning and for future building projects, to have no new office space or retail allowed, or no office space or retail allowed, which could potentially even mean getting rid of the existing office space and retail. B would allow 30 dwelling units per acre plus the current office square footage and some small non-chain neighborhood serving retail that might be appropriate for the number of people that are in the area. C, allow 30 dwelling units per acre plus the current office square footage and the current retail square footage, which is a small target. So this would be saying that it's the current retail square footage is basically the Fry's plus, I don't know, I want to say it's like 60 to 80,000 square feet is the total retail square footage. And about, let's say 30,000 of that, the target proposal we heard about was about 30,000. So you can imagine there'd be some excess square footage that would need to become other retailers if it's maintained as retail. D, change zoning to greater than 30 dwelling units per acre, which could be 40, 70, 100, some other amount. Change zoning to allow for more office space in addition to that which currently exists. So, you know, if there's, I think, let's say 180 some thousand or 200,000 right now, those are give or take, those are not the right numbers, but somewhere in that magnitude. So allowing for more than that, and zone for housing sufficient to meet the needs of the jobs generated by that office. And then F, change zoning to allow for retail. And then G would be other. Anybody feel strongly or one way or the other and want to jump in?
I have a clarifying question.
Yes.
So to help us think about this, do we know how many acres just the Sobrato property is?
I believe it's 12. Is that right, Chitra?
Yes, it's 12 acres.
Great. I believe that's all their properties, not just the Fry site. Isn't it right? All the contiguous properties that are there, which they own a few more besides just the Fry's one.
On the contiguous ownership map, it shows just the Fries and the Mike's Bikes.
In the map, it looks like it's all the one same, but there's just technically some different parcels in there. Yeah, but I'm saying in that are different parcels.
Oh.
You can't see all the parcel lines. Angela?
I was always told for the past, like, I don't know, many years, that it's 11 acres. The Fry's site, the 340 Portage site.
Yeah, I think that's because there's a few other sites that are
Exactly.
the parcel are not the same parcel, but they're contiguous, so that's why it looks on that map, Kirsten, like it's all one big thing. All right, anybody?
Should I go ahead and vote? Can we
All right.
do that or?
Go ahead, Terry. Let's go. Go ahead
Okay.
and jump in.
I think a combination of B and C. I think there might be some room for obviously retail and small office space, offices like dentists or, neighborhood serving operations. So I think a combination of B and C for myself.
Okay. All right. Anybody want to go next?
I'll go if no one volunteers. I agree with Terry. But so given the numbers immediately below, if we choose C, I wanted to clarify that we're saying that we're keeping 143,000 of office and R&D, and we're allowing them to use the current 84,000 as retail. I would like to emphasize that I wouldn't be comfortable. I would like a good fail-safe that this additional 84,000 did not get converted to office. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm only comfortable with C if I can know that they won't say, well, nobody wants to rent it, so I'm going to convert it to an office.
Yeah. Well, I can't.
I agree with that.
Okay. See if the retail square footage. Oops. And I know I said the wrong numbers, but it's somewhere around that.
Yeah, no, you were close. You said 80 and it's 84. No, I mean, you were so close. But I worry about C for that reason, because retail's not extremely vibrant and that's a lot of square feet to try to find renters for.
Yeah. Okay, others.
This is Lund. I just want to add a clarifying question to B and C.
Yeah.
So if we go down the path of saving the current 340 site, which basically means a large portion of that 11-acre site is not changing and is going to stay office and retail. Then if we're allowing the 30 dwelling units per acre and it's 11-acre site, are you saying that, let's say, 6 of the 11 acres is going to stay the same and the remaining 330 units are going to get piled on 4 of the other acres?
Well, I think it could go a couple ways. I would say if someone chooses B, which is kind of like a combination of the status quo, right? It's the current housing zoning plus the current office and retail that exists. Similar variation for letter C. Then what you could have, at least theoretically, and you saw this in some of the plans we developed, you could have some type of housing developed in this parking lot area. Now, there's a lot of reasons why developing housing there is problematic. If the building is retained, in particular, that where would the retail park, and there could obviously be some synergy of parking the retail in the parking or in the housing development some way. There also is parking obviously over here, which generally goes kind of the back of the building. You could maybe squeeze some housing in here, maybe some townhomes, because there's going to be townhomes here, right? So you could do something here perhaps. I don't know if it makes good housing or not, and kind of where are they facing, but there could be some ways to put housing in around the edges Whether or not that would get to 330 units, I don't know if it would be that many or if it would be less, number, probably be a lower number of units, just given the kind of spatial limitations of what you're left with.
Okay.
So, and I would say this, you could also answer your question by saying, hey, I think the site should just get scrapped. And so I choose this letter, but you can caveat it by saying, assuming that the building is not there anymore. So some people may have that as their preferred letter to the previous answer to the previous question, and therefore kind of carry that over to this question.
Yeah, I guess my point in asking the question is I think it's possible to do what you said for B or C
Mm-hmm.
if the site is scraped to get to 330 units plus keep the same office and retail that's there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's possible to get to 330 units if you keep the existing structure and try to build around the perimeter of the site, like you were saying. But in general, I think I'm in favor of B and C. It seems like a reasonable proposal.
Okay. All right. Oh goodness. Okay, Lakiba, do you want to go next? Lakiba, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Here we go. Thank you for that explanation, because this is kind of the thing I know least: acreage, how many units.
Mm-hmm.
So I was glad to be able to listen and get some of it clarified. So I think I also agree with B and C.
Okay. Do you want to speak to any of your choices?
Did you say something to me?
I was just saying, did you want to speak to any of your choices, like why you preferred those or anything?
Well, I like the idea of the retail, and at a prior meeting, it was mentioned about the small target. I like the idea of small businesses, but I'm good with a small target as well. I think it could add kind of some excitement, I guess I'd say, in the neighborhood. Just I don't want to put down fries in any way, but
yeah,
at least it was a store that people could go to for
right.
some things. And I didn't think it would be missed, but it kind of is missed. So I think having a store,
Yeah.
just little itty bitty stores, but small target would be good for the area.
Good. Okay. Yunin?
I would also choose B or C.
Okay. Do you want to say anything about what you like about those options?
I echo what other people saying about choice B and C. Yeah, I have the same feeling.
Okay. Great. And then Heather.
I would say B and C as well, but I have a strong preference for B with the non-chain small neighborhood stores as opposed to the small target. But if it feels like there's a lot of support for the target, I'm fine with that.
Great. All right, so looks like, and I will say, we don't have a zoning for Target specifically, but I would say Target is proxy for kind of a somewhat of a draw beyond just a neighborhood. That it might draw people. People may not come from far and wide for a Target because they have their own in their community, but others throughout South Palo Alto might come to that Target as like a place to shop. So a little bit bigger than a neighborhood draw. And then what I see here is a lot of support for B and C. And then I think Terry had an interesting idea of B and C. So kind of again, we see a lot of folks kind of coalescing around those two ideas, which I think is great. So a little bit of change, but maybe not also kind of, it's a combination of the status quo and like what we want to see in the future, which is housing as well. So great.
So, and I just was going back to my building typologies to see, you know, how many units could be fit in a low rise building if there was some of Fry's gone. And it looks like, I mean, it's hard for me to calculate exactly, but it looks like you could easily get 100 to 200, 100 plus units into that little section of Fry's if we were willing to give up. If we were willing to go, yeah, in this little section, I was sort of doing some loose math and saying if that's 11 acres and we're assuming that it's 100 and, let's see, between 140, 124 and 150 dwelling units per acre. And if that's about, I would say, a fifth of the site, you know, I was like, well, there is some space if you had some units there and you had some units down where say Ray is, you know, the storage units are. If you had some density there and you had some density up there and you had some low density townhomes or whatever at some other locations in the site, still could possibly hit your goals.
Yeah, I think so. Cool. So then we'll move on. We're making good time. It's 8:15 though, and we do have two folks who wanted to speak. So let's see if we can try to hit on these two questions, and I may go more briskly than I have in the previous questions. Angela's like nodding her head like, yeah, you should have been doing that the whole time. Okay, number 9. Should the Cloud Air site be zoned to allow for housing as well as office space? Really simple, yes, no other. And just a reminder, here's that location here. I think we may have talked about this last time in our group, although I know our combinations changed. I think most people were okay with yes, but we'll just maybe go rapid fire, just say if you're yes, no, or other. So we'll start, Lund, with you, because you're at the top of my screen. Lund, you are on mute if you're talking.
Sorry, yes.
All right, Kirsten? Kirsten? No, okay.
Same thing. I didn't unmute myself, yes.
Okay. All right, Alex?
Yes.
All right, Terry?
Yes.
Okay, Lakiba?
I was gonna say no, but I'm kind of okay if it's not right across the street from me.
Yeah, I mean, I think last time, what I remember is you and Yunan, we talked about the location of the housing on the site as being
Correct.
important. That's what I remember, so.
That's correct. So I guess I could say yes.
I think we talked about it being at the corner of like Park and Page Mill, or Park and Oregon Expressway.
Right, exactly.
Okay. Yunan?
Yes. Yeah, I think we discussed this location of the housing last time.
Yeah. And then Heather?
Yes.
Okay. I'm gonna not go further into this because for once everyone's on a yes side, and we're gonna just keep moving on and try to see if we can get to the other two. Okay. Question 8. And this is also Angela kind of consolidating previous answers to try to help see like, hey, does this get what we said? So before there were like 5 different answers. Assuming that all new buildings are designed to reduce apparent mass, the articulation, there's stepped back in design, there's careful orientation, there's a variety of heights and materials that are appropriate. Which building typologies do you feel comfortable with for new buildings in the NBCAP? A is townhomes, which were the 3-story townhomes with the garage in the ground floor level. low-rise greenways, which were about 4 stories surrounded by green space, low-rise with retail, which I think were 5 stories in appropriate locations, and they had retail on the ground floor. And B is all of the above, plus the mid-rise block buildings in other appropriate locations. And I think the mid-rise block was the 8-story building, if I'm remembering correctly. So we'll just kind of we'll go backwards this time. So Heather, where would you put yourself?
I would say B.
Okay. Yunin? Yunin, if you said something, you were on mute.
I think that would be A.
Okay, great. Lakiva?
The ones that are the lowest ones are which one of those choices? They both seem to be, were they all 4 stories and higher?
This is 3 to 5.
Is what A is?
Yeah, so the townhomes are 3, low-rise greenways 4. The low-rise with retail has the retail on the bottom floor, and it's up to 5 stories. So this would be obviously in appropriate locations. I think last time we talked about like some of the higher buildings beyond El Camino, for example. So that might be 5 stories now kind of thing.
Okay. All right, then A.
Okay. Oops. Terry?
A.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm in A.
Okay. Kirsten?
I have to, I'll say A, but I'm okay with 6 stories, which I think exceeds the 55 feet, but I'm not okay with 85.
Got it. And then Lind.
I think I agree with Kirsten. I would be okay going up to 6 stories. I actually probably would be okay going higher, but it's not realistic in Palo Alto and in this neighborhood. So I think I'd be okay going 6.
Okay. Great. All right. We are chugging. Okay. You guys are so efficient. We're going to just keep moving on. Thank you for that. Last question. Question 2 of all things to end with. Office square footage. What option seems best to you? This would be for the entire area. So not just 340 Portage, but kind of a general policy for the plan area regarding office space. And I know I would say, keep in mind, I know we asked other questions that asked like, what kinds of office would you like? And so you kind of keep in mind your vision for the types of offices that may or may not be in the area. So zone for no office space at all. So it could be a scheme where existing office is kind of grandfathered in, but when an office closes, it can't open up again as an office. Allow current office square footage to remain for the time being, but zone for small neighborhood serving offices only. So that if somebody's building a new office, it's got to be, maybe it's 10,000 square feet or some size that is more appropriate for smaller tenants like dentists or lawyers or architects, what have you. C, no additional office square footage, but allow for both large office as well as neighborhood serving office to exist indefinitely at the current square footage. So that'd be kind of like we were just talking about 340 Portage. Okay, they get to rebuild the 140 or whatever thousand it was that they have. Maybe it's in a new building, but that same amount could be rebuilt and can be preserved. But no additional office. And D is allow this much new office square footage. So you might have a number that you would say you'd be okay. In addition to the current existing 578,000 square feet, with the proviso that all office be associated with development of housing units equivalent to the number of workers. So there's kind of a little bit of a seesaw there, or it's tempering the housing, the office in that they have to build the housing, similar to Mountain View's North Bayshore plan. Although, we'll see, hopefully that gets built. Okay, so we'll start in the middle this time. And by the middle, it's the middle of my screen at least. So we'll do Alex. What do you have a preference for?
I'm okay with either B or C.
B or C?
I'm a little worried about how you could enforce B. Yeah, and I think that we should actually like look at the employment density, like if you factor in like Stanford and the research park.
Uh-huh.
I think it'll show that we probably should do C.
As in there's
Because I think that we've got huge amounts of office space already in the research park. Right? I think it was something like 10 million square feet.
yeah. Okay, Terry?
I think this is a difficult one because but I guess I would lean toward, let's see, I guess I would, B sounds like reasonable because it allows for the office square footage to remain. I guess that when a time comes when they move out or grow and they don't want to be there anymore, then you could convert it to other neighborhood serving businesses. So I guess I'm closer to B than anything else.
Okay. Lakiba?
Let's see. Okay. I'm leaning toward B, but I'm a little on the fence, meaning I think C would allow for the current building to stay. Is that correct? Or like as long as they want? Cloudera.
Yes. Well, I think B and C are very similar. So with Cloudera specifically, B would allow them to stay just as they are. They could exist. But if, Cloudera were to ever move out,
Yeah.
then we need to convert that. That building might be a bad example or a difficult one because it's a large office. It's built for like a single tenant. So I don't know how it'd be converted, but theoretically they'd have to figure out some way to convert it. Letter C would say, well, let's say Cloudera was like, hey, we want to rebuild, and it'd say, okay, well, you can rebuild, but you can only have the same amount of square footage that you have now for your office.
Is that C?
Yeah.
The latter of what you said?
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the BC area.
Okay. Yunan, do you have a preference?
I think the B and C, I'm okay with both. I don't want to give a very strict restriction on how the office is going to be used.
Uh-huh.
Or sometimes it's all marketing will decide.
Yeah. You said B and C, right?
Yes.
Okay, Heather?
Yeah, I'd say B or C as well.
Okay. And then we'll go Kirsten.
Some types of structures are unsuited for B, but I would say B with allowing C in structures that don't allow B.
Okay, and then Lund.
I think Alex is right on B. I don't know how you would enforce that. I don't know if there's anything in the current code that would allow the office space to be zoned specifically for small neighborhood serving offices. Maybe there could be, but I would tend to go in the direction of C, or even though it may be unpopular, even D. I'm not saying now is the time for D, but if you're like zoning for the next several decades, who knows what the future is going to look like. And as long as you're allowing the flexibility, if you provide office, to also provide a equitable amount of housing to either offset it or more than offset it, then I would think D in the long run lets flexibility in the future.
Okay, well, we have finished all of them. Thank you all so much. We see clearly in this one a lot of synergy around B and C.
Isn't there a question 5.1 about the overall average?
You're right. Oh my gosh, I was celebrating too soon. Okay, it is 8:28. Okay, we'll finish this in like 1 minute. Just everyone's gonna say their option and then we're gonna stop. Okay, I'm not even gonna read it. So, well, I will read it. What average height for new buildings would you feel comfortable with in NB cap? A, 1 to 3 stories. B, 40 to 55 feet, 3 to 5 stories. C, 55 to 65 feet, which is 5 to 6 stories. D, 65 to 90 feet, which is 6 to 8 stories, and over at 90 feet. Okay, we'll go Heather. Do you have a preference?
If this is average, right? Not.
Yeah.
Okay. So somewhere between B and C.
Okay. Yunin?
B.
Okay. Akiba?
B.
Terry? Oops, sorry, I'm not writing the right names.
I'll go with A, which is 50 feet. But I could, on special occasions or special circumstances, go to 55. So
Okay. Alex?
I'm a B.
Kirsten? Kirsten, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. B, because it allows me to do my 6 stories here and there.
And then Lund.
Agreed. B with an occasional C.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you, members of the public who are waiting. Thank you, working group members. We got through it. Woohoo! We have Cedric who has a hand, and Ellen. I don't know if you still have a hand, but if you're here and you'd like to give public comment, and if anybody who's still here wants to give public comment, we certainly can have you participate. So, Ellen, since you did put your hand up before, first we will call on you. You have 3 minutes to address the working group on any topics you'd like us to hear.
Hi, thank you for the work you're doing. It's very good. I wanted to just say something about parking. You know, some of these developments, you know, don't have enough parking, and what happens is they still have numerous amounts of vehicles. Thus, parking gets impacted the neighborhood. The surrounding neighborhood becomes impacted, and it's a big problem. All this parking along the street and the inlet streets as well are filled with parking. So please have enough parking. And the other item, just to support, I do like, you know, being more contextual with the existing neighborhood. So I'm inclined to be more on the low-rise side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Cedric?
Hello, yes, thank you also for having this meeting. I'll go in reverse from, I'm gonna cover your questions in reverse. So on height, I would vote for C to allow for 5 stories. Sometimes they need to go a little bit higher, like there's an elevator or something, some retaining walls, some walls on the top of rooftop gardens that might exceed a little bit, or ground floor retail is a little bit taller than residential. For the office square footage, I'm also a B or a C. I think Kirsten was a good suggestion. I prefer the kind of the lower, for question 8, the A, option A. For the dwelling units per acre, I think it's an ambiguous question because a 1-bedroom studio is a dwelling unit and a 5-bedroom apartment is a dwelling unit. So it's kind of this weird metric. In the little plan that I drew up, it has about 780 bedrooms, which is somewhere between 350 units to 800 units if these are multi-bedroom apartments or individual tiny studios. So I would vote for the current office square footage and small non-chain neighborhood serving retails, and 30 or more, up to 100 dwelling units per acre, assuming it's designed well, in a way that is respectful to the neighbors and not looming over them, like the ones I've designed. For the historic nature, I think we should retain and adapt certain historic buildings, specifically the portion of the cannery that has the monitor buildings with the gray roofs, and the old dormitory building. I think if you retain all the historic structures, then you really have very limited options in terms of adding housing to the site. But if you keep just those two key buildings, you can celebrate the history and still allow a lot of new housing on the site. And then parking, I think, one parking, I think the option E was good, capped at 2 spaces per unit. I think realistically, I mean, I'm a bike advocate, but realistically people drive, and people will have cars unless you put contracts in that they can't have cars. And so you'll have issues with overflow parking into the adjacent neighborhood if you go to aggro on that in terms of limiting cars, parking spaces.
I think your time is up.
Okay, well, maybe I'll send the rest in comments. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
If you do email this in, Cedric, that would be great, and we can take a look at those and even pass them on to the rest of the working group so everybody can see those comments, not just tonight's subgroup. Great. Okay, well, it's 8:35. Thank you all for your time. Please respond to Teacher's email about what time to get together, and we will send another message. It should be as soon as Thursday, if we're going to have a second meeting in August, which would be earlier, hopefully, than our meeting where we're all getting together. That would be focused a little bit on something we talked about today, which is traffic and circulation, as well as affordable housing specifically. So thank you all. Enjoy your rest of your evening and have the last good few days of July. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.